So I guess you're busy now for endocrinology exam.
That would be perfect.
I was thinking about starting with the swine diseases, but I'd rather follow the syllabus. So we start with the equine diseases.
Just give a try.
Yes.
So we're not doing that last bit of bovine?
Oh yes, we will do it.
Okay.
Sometime.
Okay.
So this disease is an important disease in the U.S. It has some similar symptoms with equine infectious anemia. That's equine arthritis, viral arthritis. Now, equine viral arthritis, one of the main features of this disease is the presence of pathology which is associated with vasculitis. The virus also is a virus that can infect macrophages, therefore disable their function, which is the production of interferons, very important in the fight against viral diseases. It also uses these cells to travel from one side to another, so it becomes systemic. The photos here showing the eyelid edema, although this is not really a consistent feature in equine arthritis, but conjunctivitis and edema can be one of the signs, but also this what's called, well, in simple term, the hive, which is basically an allergic reaction. It is thought that as a result of secretion of inflammatory mediators such as cytokines and chemokines, causing this rash or this hive, if you want, on the skin and in several places. We'll explain this in a moment. So, equine arthritis belongs to the family Arteriviridae. It's an RNA virus, hence the problems. The main route of transmission, which is helpful in guiding us towards the lesions or the pathology, is respiratory and venereal. If respiratory, meaning that it causes respiratory, obviously symptoms, but it can be, it's very similar to herpes in that respect, being systemic. Equine herpes, we'll explain later on. Venereal, meaning the transmission through semen, for example, is an important feature causing abortion. The virus, in fact, as I said, macrophages use them to travel from one side to another, but also disable their function, which is important, again, viral diseases. It infects, once it reaches the lymph nodes, local lymph nodes, it travels through the lymph and joins the blood circulation. Once it joins the blood circulation, it infects endothelial cells, causing vasculitis, and as a result, edema and hemorrhages. The clinical features, as I said, can vary. However, the most consistent clinical symptoms are related to what's called the stiff gait. The stiff gait, meaning that this is as a result of the edema in the hind limbs, causing that heavy gait, if you want, in the animal. In addition to the presence of leukopenia. The other symptoms vary quite a lot. Urticaria may not be present, which is the hive. The edema around the lid or in the lid may not be present as well. conjunctivitis or rhinitis. Some symptoms, it could be very mild. So edema and leukopenia appear to be the main consistent clinical features. Now, in relation to abortion, if the animals are not vaccinated, it's likely to cause abortion storm involving many animals. If the animals are vaccinated, then they should be protected, although this is RNA virus, so there are a change in RNA strains that may cause from time to time abortion. How does this happen? As I said, the virus is present in the semen of stallion semen, and hence the quality of the semen, whether it's used artificially or naturally, is important in terms of whether the virus is present or not. Yes?
Do you mean if they have poor quality, like in the semen, the cells itself, or like in the fluid? What do you mean the quality?
No, the virus. The virus is spread. The quality meaning non-infected.
Non-infected?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the transmission is respiratory, as I said, and venereal. If we talk a little bit about the transmission, the main problem is really the carrier stallion. So these guys can carry the virus for a very long time and can shed the virus. Shedding the virus can be through masturbation, fomites, can be personal if it is transmitted from the personnel who's handling these horses, and a teaser stallion. Now, as I said, so this is the main problem. It can spread the infection horizontally to the stallion colts. Once this is a spread, if they mate with a male, which is pregnant, that will likely cause abortion. Now, giltings do not cause abortion, and the reason for this is because obviously the lack of, in this case, testosterone, which is the driving force of the viral shedding. Now, if, as I said, the venereal transmission can be either natural or artificial, and it can cause abortion in unvaccinated males. Sometimes, even in vaccinated males, if the strain of RNA is different, the pregnancy is carried on, but the fetuses or the neonates that are born succumb to particularly interstitial pneumonia. Foal that are less than 6 months are not susceptible to the infection. The reason for this is because of maternal antibodies. Okay, so persistently infected stallions are a problem, and they can, the number of stallions can amount to 30 to 70% of horses that are infected. And in relation to the pathogenesis, I explained it, how it occurs. So the main pathology feature is vascular injury, hence the edema, and hence the hemorrhages. In foals, the interstitial pneumonia, or bronchointerstitial pneumonia, which is a main problem that can cause death. The aborted fetuses pathology, these guys are typically otolized, meaning that macroscopically and microscopically they do not have cellular structure that can be identified. However, there's a lot of, it can be seen that there is a lot of fluid in the peritoneal cavity and the pleural cavities. The virus is transmitted through semen, hence the virus concentration is greatest in sexual glands and a vas deferens. So when it comes to diagnosis, we're following here mainly the virus, the presence of the virus. As I said, the virus can be present in macrophages, and can be present in the semen. So diagnostically techniques that can look for virus in macrophages like PCR, RT-PCR, and in the semen as well, RT-PCR. But also we can use serology for identification of the infection or for detection of the infection. The reason for this is because antibody stays for several years in these guys. So they mount a good antibody response that stays for some time. So then we can use ELISA and virus neutralization assay. Yes?
On the previous slide, you said virus concentration is greatest in sex glands and in the vas deferens.
Mm-hmm.
But then earlier you had said something about the quality of semen, whether it's artificial insemination or natural.
Mm-hmm.
With an artificial insemination, wouldn't there be less viral concentration because they wash the semen?
Oh, not necessarily, no. I mean, what do you mean they wash the semen?
So, okay, it depends. Are we talking about a frozen sample? Because with a frozen sample, you don't freeze it with the regular fluids of the animal.
Mm-hmm.
You wash it and freeze it in like a yolk base.
Mm-hmm.
So then, with that being said, the virus concentration, which is mainly in the sex glands and vas deferens, would be washed out.
Well, they don't wash the semen. I mean, the semen is collected and the semen is frozen. This is how it is done.
You wash it. Okay, so back to the research I was doing this summer.
Okay.
We were freezing the semen, and same goes for goats, dogs, cats, whatever. You wash out and resuspend in a yolk base because it withstands the freezing better than the actual sex fluids.
Well, there are different ways of freezing the semen. It does not have to be the yolk base freezing.
Okay.
Secondly, the virus is present in the seminal fluid, obviously, and you said you're washing it. Washing it with what?
I was washing with TLH, with thyroid lactate HEPES buffer.
Okay.
So that, and then takes out the fluids from this sample, like
Right.
the fluid that the semen is naturally suspended
Okay.
in. It
Okay.
washes that out.
I don't know. There might be different ways of handling the the serum from the semen from different species. But what the information I can give you is that it can be transmitted by artificial insemination. And most likely because of the presence of the virus in the semen. That's why I can give you that. Okay. Now, the presence of the virus in the semen is the most important thing, which means the animals can be seropositive, meaning showing antibodies against the virus, and yet those are used for breeding. They can be seropositive, but negative in the serum, in the semen. So horses that are negative in semen, they don't have the virus in the semen, and are seropositive, they're allowed to breed. However, those that have both, it means they have antibody against the virus in the blood circulation and the virus in the semen, are removed from breeding strategies or breeding protocols. So in summary, the control, it includes movement restrictions, isolation of infected horses and quarantine period after recovery, good hygiene, and surveillance by laboratory tests. The other disease which is similar is equine infectious anemia. Now, equine infectious anemia is rare in the US because of the surveillance programs that are adopted. However, this disease is more common in the Gulf states. And that's the reason for this is the humidity, the high humidity, which encourages flies breeding. The most type of flies are the tabanid flies and the stable flies that can carry this virus. Now, the characteristic feature obviously is anemia, in equine infectious anemia, this is showing here the petechial hemorrhages and the pale mucosa as a result of the anemia. Like the equine arteritis infect macrophages. Again, macrophages are important in the fight against viral diseases. It also causes lysis, red blood cells lysis. It is fought through the binding of antibody and complement to red blood cells, resulting in their hemolysis. It exists in different forms, and these forms reflect the type of the virus. It's the retrovirus. You can somehow link it in your mind to FIV, feline immunodeficiency virus, and the properties of what it does in cats. It does similarly in horses. In acute stage, it may lead to death within 1 month. This is really rapid death, and that's because of the hemorrhages that are associated with this disease. It can be like the equine arteritis, viral arteritis. It can be the animals can be persistently infected, and hence they shed the virus and transmit the disease. Or it can be chronic relapsing. That's a feature of retroviruses, meaning that there are no symptoms, and for some times, and then when the animals become immunosuppressed, or another disease can activate the virus from the proviral, if you want, the proviral form of the virus to full-blown replicative virus. Or it can remain silent for the life of the infected horse. If the horse is fine, is okay, and there is no suppression, immunosuppression, then the virus can stay in a proviral form for a very long time. Now, the clinical features, the severe anemia, the petechial hemorrhages in the mucosa, and the problem of persistence of the virus for a very long time, either in silent form or present in shedding. Now, in relation to transmission, I mentioned the tabanid flies and the stable flies. It can be transmitted through equipment, handling of non-sterile equipment, and other possible transplacental, other possible modes, colostrum, milk, saliva, urine, and semen. So when it comes to diagnosis, again, we're looking here for two things. We're looking for antibodies, and we're looking for the presence of the virus. In equine infectious anemia, like in arteritis, there is prolonged production, if you want, or presence of antibodies in the circulation, like in the case of FIV. Hence, the test for antibody detections is the Coggins test, which is the immunodiffusion test, if you recall. And this is usually done in USDA-approved laboratories. Now, this test is used heavily when it comes to moving animals from one state to another, or moving animal to exhibitions. They need to be sure that those guys are free of the infection anemia virus. Now, the immunodiffusion Coggins test is better to be, in a way, combined with the ELISA test, because in the case of the immunodiffusion test, the sensitivity is low, the specificity is high. In the ELISA test, the sensitivity is high, the specificity is lower. You can look using the PCR for the virus. In this case, the most consistent finding is the proviral form of the virus embedded in the host genome. So using PCR for proviral DNA. The virus does not replicate in macrophages, hence you don't find inclusion bodies. And so in macrophages it's present in the proviral form. So the control is similar to arteritis in that the removal of infected animals, if the animals, the animals can be either euthanized or can be kept, but they can be kept in the location where they're found to be infected for